How do you relate to this Ukraine invasion? Do you think about your Bitcoin or stock markets, or do you think about the people suffering and how to help? First I thought to not make a video about this, but then I felt I should. Because the Western world intends to fight Russia with money. Not with armies flying in, not with drones, with money. So if money is the weapon of choice this time, we better understand what is going on. I'll share my insights, but first I want to say that I feel sad for the people. I've lived in a lot of countries and perhaps seen more human suffering than many of you watching. I genuinely thought Europe was beyond the point where we invade each other with tanks. I thought we left those barbaric times behind, but apparently not. Moving some of this fight to the money arena is new, and I welcome that. It's a paradox, because at these sad times when people are dying, children losing their fathers or dying themselves, money feels trivial, right? At least I feel so. Frankly, I couldn't care less if my investments are up or down a couple of percent as I'm sitting here comfortably in Sweden today. But we need to dig into it, and Bitcoin could play a role here, which concerns me a little. I'm against invasions. I'm against a bigger kid bullying a smaller kid because he can. I'm against a bigger country bullying a smaller country because they can. But I'm not against the Russian people. By the way, expect a mass exodus from Russia. Anyone with a means and a passport is trying to get out right now. Many urban educated Russians are horrified and terrified. Most Russians probably hate Putin more than you do right now. Sanctions will hit everyday people. That's the idea. The idea is that they will be so dissatisfied that they will change their leadership. I'm not sure there's actually any evidence that this tactic works. During the past 2 years, you have probably experienced some really shitty decisions from your own leaders. That doesn't make you a bad person. Say, for example, that you were against lockdowns in your country or whatever. Then say that the entire world agreed with you. Only your one president insisted on the lockdowns. Then imagine if all the other countries makes sanctions against you personally, who were against it in the first place. And then imagine that you can't elect another president either. That would suck, right? That's probably the situation for most Russians right now. So please be kind, let's be kind. And this economic response will affect us all, even though we live far away from the physical battle on the ground. But let's not get a bully get away with his bullying. What is he after? A lot of people are speculating that he wants to restore the borders of the old Soviet Union. This was the old border. Russia over here, Sweden is this line up here, Estonian SSR, Latvian SSR, Lithuanian SSR, Belarusian SSR, and Ukrainian SSR. Is it this? I have no idea. I don't credit myself for knowing what he is thinking. But what I can say is that initially I felt quite sad because I felt that the response from the world was quite lame. But I feel that this is changing. Even Sweden is sending military aid to Ukraine, including 5,000 anti-tank weapons. Anna Linde is our foreign minister, so this is credible. The economic attack is unprecedented, and it aims to cut off Russia from the international imports and exports. So let's try to understand here what that really means. Here is Russia's product exports, and we can see that a lot of it indeed constitutes energy exports. Crude petroleum, refined petroleum, coal briquettes, petroleum gas. There's also iron, aluminium, a good section of gold actually, and commodities like wheat. The export destinations, a huge part is actually Netherlands, United Kingdom, Germany, Belarus, Poland and so on. Also China, Turkey, Kazakhstan, India. United States is fairly small here, 3%. Then if we click on, for example, petroleum, we actually get the breakdown for that specific export product. So there we can see that petroleum, Netherlands 19%, Poland 6%, Germany 9%, China 34.7%. Total yearly exports, this was 2019, was 407 billion. Then if we look at imports, it's quite a different picture. Here you can see that it's much more diversified. Russia pretty much lets other countries do the manufacturing. They import everything from broadcasting equipment, cars, construction vehicles, medicaments, beauty products, rubber tires, citrus fruits. As you can see, there's a long list of small different products, everything you need basically. And where are those products coming from then? Well, Germany 12%, China 19%, Italy, Poland, France, Japan, South Korea, and also here in the United States is quite small, below 4%. And what the world is saying now is that we're going to try to cut off Russia from much of this trade. And if you can't pay for imports with rubles, they will probably become worth less, which could cause a run on the banks. Like this foreign correspondent in Moscow saying, my hotel in Moscow allowed me to set the bill early because they aren't sure if credit cards are going to work once the SWIFT sanctions kick in. And you get these enormous lines of people who want to withdraw money from ATM machines and so on. And there are analysts that say that some of Russia's banks are failing or likely to fail. And if we then proceed to look at some charts, this is how much one Russian ruble is worth in US dollar. And the drop the past 11 days has been over 30%, meaning the ruble has lost a third of its value as measured in US dollar. And just look at this bar here today. It's over 20% drop just today. It gets more in percent if you measure it the other way, but I feel that this is the most correct way to measure it. And if we zoom out, this has not been a happy picture all the way since 1998. The ruble has basically lost 93% of its value against the US dollar. Now the big but has been here that at least in the initial discussion, the SWIFT payment sanctions were excluding the energy payments. And as you saw on the export charts, that was a big part of Russia's exports. This guy, who is an energy and commodities columnist at Bloomberg, wrote, the White House in call with reporters tonight made it clear that it's actively making sure that the SWIFT move against Russia does not impact energy payments. The below is from Biden administration senior official. Is there a marking which denotes that an energy payment is being made? If so, we could exempt those payments. So that's one path. The second path is to choose the institutions that we de-SWIFT wisely. We can simply choose the institutions where most of the energy flow do not occur. And this is one part that I was really upset about. Is it that important for Germany and Netherlands and these countries? We rich, Western countries, can't we put up with little inconvenience or higher energy prices? I mean, look at the world. Many countries are living with load shedding and other issues, and they survive that too. I felt that this is the time to step up, take some inconvenience, take some cost, and help Ukraine out. And of course, the foreign minister of Ukraine writes that we insist on full embargo for Russian oil and gas. Buying them now means paying for the murder of Ukrainian men, women and children. Now it seems that at least some people agree with me, and some companies are taking bolder steps than the politicians here. BP quits Russia and takes a 25 billion hit on their balance sheet. And this Norwegian company is following suit. Anders Oppedal, this gentleman again reports about self-sanctioning by Western banks, refusing to deal with anything Russia where the governments have targeted or not. We have already seen signs of that, oil at bigger risk than gas. So sometimes to filter through all the news, to really see what the conclusion is, what do people really believe when it's money at stake? We can look at the charts because that is the consolidation of all the market participants' real belief, what they really think is going to happen. If we look at global oil prices, it did spike up here a little bit on 24th of February and today, but nothing dramatic. I mean, if we zoom out, as you recall, in April 2020, oil price was negative. And since then, it has been a pretty steady climb from here. So you see that these moves here aren't that big, actually. Now, of course, oil is very location dependent. You need to get it in pipelines to the right place. But still, if we instead look at the price of coal in Rotterdam, as you recall, Netherlands was a big buyer. You see that there has indeed been some spikes here. But if we zoom out here, you still see the perspective of this isn't that dramatic, even though it looks dramatic on a day-to-day chart here. Price of wheat has spiked, as you remember, that was also a big export. And if we look at, for example, coal in India, we can see that there's been an increase in price of 13% the past couple of days. Still, nothing of this is as dramatic as you would maybe imagine listening to the news. But what about the impact from this conflict in Ukraine on the Fed policy in the US, which we have learned has a lot of impact on a lot of other markets? Financial Times writes that Ukraine war unlikely to deflect Fed from path of interest rate rises. And the reason for this is probably this. United States inflation rate year on year, 7.5% here in February. And if we zoom out, we see that it hasn't been that high since 1982. So they probably want to do something to tighten the economy to prevent this from going completely haywire. At the same time, what is the result of conflict? like we're seeing now in Ukraine? Well, the result is more government spendings on everything. Maybe oil prices go up, maybe there's cost for war, cost for relief, cost for all this tension, problems with trade that will arise, and all the secondary effects from that. And the response to that will probably once again be more government spending, which will cause more inflation. That's probably why they feel that they need to do something here. But let's see. There will be two forces here working against each other for sure. If we move a little closer to crypto, I want to start with something positive. You probably saw this tweet, and please be careful with this, guys. There's already a lot of scams, people who say that they raise money to help the victims or help to support Ukraine and so on, while actually it's not. They're just taking the money. This one I felt was the exception, because this is actually the official Twitter account of Ukraine. And if you look at the address on Etherscan has also written this address is used by Ukraine to accept crypto donations. Sources here, and here. And we can see the donations coming in here by the minute. I found this source which claims to track the donations. They have this widget here, 77, that's 14, that's 4, that's 18. So maybe $20 million approximately so far. Now, I personally do not know exactly what is happening with this money. I still think that the best way to support the victims of war is through established NGOs, which have processes and people and audits to make sure that the money is really used in the best way to help the true victims. So my recommendation would still be to use the traditional NGOs if you want to help the victims. Now, it's not so common I say this, but one thing actually bothers me a little bit about cryptocurrencies here, and that is if the world is now trying to put pressure on Russia and they can't use the ruble and the SWIFT network for exchange anymore, what can they do? Well, they could probably turn in this direction instead. China might be quite happy to replace the US dollar and euro based system with a yuan based system. The other thing they could probably do, and for once I think that the New York Times writing a very negative crypto article actually has some point. Will Russia try to transition more to using cryptocurrencies instead? Well, they could, but I don't think it will make it easier to evade sanctions. Because as we have seen, the fiat on and off ramps in the West are already very regulated. As I pointed out in this tweet, for example, it was extremely difficult for the Bitfinex hackers to launder almost anything out of their 4 billion worth of stolen Bitcoin over 5 years. And if you wanted to exclude all Russian individuals from the entire Western economy, of course there are ways to do so. Mr. Powell here, the Kraken founder, writes that despite my deep respect for the Ukrainian people, Kraken cannot freeze the accounts of our Russian clients without a legal requirement to do so. But Russians should be aware that such a requirement could be imminent. So what does this mean for the price of Bitcoin then? Is the Ukrainian people turning to Bitcoin to get their money out of the country? Is Russia forced to turn to Bitcoin to avoid sanctions, something that would not be good for Bitcoin at all? Well, I think it is like this. Right now, Bitcoin is two things at the same time. First, it's a risk-on asset. It's something that people want to buy when their risk appetite is high. I cover that in detail in this video, how Bitcoin has been very correlated to Nasdaq, meaning other risk-on assets. Watch that one if you haven't, because it's very important. And if we look here, we can see that Nasdaq has had a major recovery the past couple of days, meaning risk appetite maybe is back on. And Bitcoin has also had a massive recovery the past couple of days, up 16% since the bottom on February 24th. On the other hand, Bitcoin is also a type of digital gold, which I covered in this video, and gold is a risk-off asset. That's where you run when you don't want to have any risk. And somehow Bitcoin is a little bit of both of these, and during different times it has correlated with the risk-on asset type categories, and other times it has been correlated with gold. And if we look at gold, gold had a major breakout here a couple of weeks ago. Then on February 24th, it really went through the roof here. Since then, it backed up quite a bit, but now it's coming again. That means people are buying gold. Maybe they predict more inflation coming as a result of this conflict one way or another, and the way to secure money is then gold. And some other people will feel that the way to secure money is actually the digital gold, meaning Bitcoin. While again, there's other people who feel that Bitcoin isn't really digital gold yet. It's more of a high-risk, highly speculative asset, which is a risk-on asset. And right now I feel that we're in a world where there's different people who have taken this perspective, other people have taken the other perspective on Bitcoin, and these two will coexist for some time. So if we're looking at the Bitcoin situation in isolation, what is clear is that it hasn't collapsed. The risk-off narrative has not led to a collapse in Bitcoin. On the contrary, the support here at 36,600 turned out incredibly strong on February 24th, and the sellers down here were violently rejected, and we're now hitting up against this resistance instead at little over 40,000. And if we break through here with this recovery, the trend will soon turn back up. So I think Bitcoin here is at a point where it's indecisive, and anyone saying that they know what will happen from here, I think are overconfident. Will Russia just sit there and do nothing as this is hitting them? Will it really just back off, or could there come some response from Russia? That do concerns me. Like and subscribe if you found this valuable. I'm not monetizing this video in any way. My heart, my support, my sympathies goes out to everyone in Ukraine and anyone harmed by this conflict in any way. Thank you, tack. City och Larsen out. Hej då.